Do you think yoga is all about twisting yourself into a pretzel? You are not alone in that. Join us for the 4th episode in our Changemaker series as Angel Evanger untangles the full scope of what's included in a true yoga practice. As always, I am your host, Sarah Woodard. I am a nature-centric badass dedicated to helping sensitive souls of all ages feel safe and empowered to channel their passions to create positive change, an award-winning children's author, and the creator of Spark Consciousness. The purpose of this show, and really everything I do, is to provide a supportive and nurturing place where you can learn, explore, and expand your knowledge so that you can feel more connected to nature and the world around you. My goal is to offer some unique perspectives. I encourage you to listen with an open heart and mind. And with this occasional series of bonus episodes called Changemakers, I highlight the ways everyday women, just like you, have been a force for positive change. And these are just randomly interspersed between the usual bi-weekly episodes. As a quick reminder, the spelling of give a fuck is F***K. And as always, also a tremendous thank you to my existing patrons on Patreon. I would normally do a life update here, but I don't have anything new to report that is fun or exciting. So we're just going to skip right over to our lovely guest, Angel, and she is going to jump on and do the usual thing that all of our guests get to do and ask me one question. So, Angel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and ask me whatever it is you want to ask me.
So my name is Angel Evanger. I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for almost 5 years. And above and beyond that, I'm a business owner. I'm a podcast host myself. But my real foundation with everything that I do comes from the foundation of yoga and what that means. And I'm really excited to kind of share that with you today. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Was there any question you wanted to ask, or do you want to just jump right into the
let's see. Since it's the holidays, why don't we ask what your favorite holiday memory is?
Oh, that is such a fascinating question. So for my listeners, we are recording this right around the holidays. This may not be up until a little bit later, but it's still an excellent question for any time of year. So that's totally fine. So my holiday is actually Hanukkah. And I have to say there's not a lot of great memories for me surrounding any holidays because I grew up in a very waspy town. I was the only Jewish kid in my class. So a lot of my memories are more about me having to learn to be an activist at a very young age and go to the adults in the school and say, hi, my holiday, hello? And and for the kid who was so shy, she did not talk to her parents if we were in public or there was other people around. This was very, very hard. But I have to say that, like, those formative years, they're the reason I do what I do now. I don't want anyone of any age to feel like they don't have a voice, because we do. We just have to be taught to use it. And I was really fortunate to have I think it was 3rd grade, this one school guidance counselor who, I don't know why, but he saw this ability in me to speak up for myself. And he kind of took me under his wing. And when I went to him and said, Mr. Mortielli, why are there not any Hanukkah decorations in the cafeteria? He said, well, you know what, Sarah? I don't know. But let's go talk to the lunch ladies, because that's what we called them back in the 80s. That's not meant an offensive term. That's just what we called them back then. And we did. He took me by the hand, because again, back then you could touch children politely like that in schools. And we walked down to the cafeteria, and their response, which, but for the time it was okay. They said, well, you know, Sarah, we just don't have any, but if you make some, we'll hang them up. So I went home and I made a shit ton of holiday decorations, and they did hang them up. Now, as an adult, it's still a little bit singling me out to make sure my holiday is represented. They should have, as soon as that complaint was lodged, essentially it wasn't a complaint, but you know what I'm saying? As soon as that question was asked, adults should have gone forth and adulted and found actual store-bought decorations so they would look just as nice as the store-bought Christmas decorations. it was still a little bit inclusion varnishing, still a little bit like not inclusive, but it was an improvement. And I learned to use my voice. And so that, I think, it's a good memory in the sense that it was an empowering experience. And like I said, it's kind of why I do what I do today. So
yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I love that story. That's so great.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's actually informed one of my kids' books too, called Batia's Lunch. So, yeah, I use that. I use that a lot. It clearly was an important piece of my life. So I appreciate you giving me the chance to share it. So tell me first of all, tell me how you got started in yoga, because I know that in itself can be a journey for people.
So, I've been doing yoga for a number of years and the place that I went to was, would explain the aspects of yoga above and beyond kind of what the poses were. And so I was just getting more and more curious about what that meant and what that was. And I didn't have any intention on actually teaching yoga. I was just, my intention was to learn more about yoga, use it for self-improvement on myself, and, just kind of grow in a way that was. And that was kind of my goal originally. And I didn't plan on teaching yoga all the way through the class. Even when I got my certificate, I was like, I'm not going to teach yoga. But I ended up, I ended up finding a local gym that was looking for a yoga teacher. So I was like, okay, I'm going to apply. And if all the clouds align, then I'm supposed to teach yoga. And if they don't, then that's okay. So everything went like super easy and I got hired. And then I was like, oh, what am I doing? I'm now teaching yoga. And so it all kind of just happened, fairly easily, and all really just kind of fell into place. And the yoga training itself was 8 months long, so it's like a really long training. It was 200 hours of work that you needed to do. So it wasn't like, let's go away for the weekend and take a training. It was pretty in depth on all the things that you do. So I really enjoyed it. And then, like I said, I didn't really mean to become a yoga teacher to start with, and it all just kind of fell into place. So that's where I ended up.
I love that. I love how you just kind of fell into it. But I have a question, a follow-up question to that. So you weren't planning to teach yoga, so why did you take the teacher training?
Well, the training itself, it's a teacher training, but it also has such really good information on yoga philosophy and the 8 limbs of yoga and all this great other stuff that I could use for myself. So becoming a teacher is definitely part of that, but you didn't have to use it that way if you chose not to. So it was just such great information either way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's kind of how it was with my shamanic training. Like, best thing I ever did was get my shamanic training. Do I use it much in my healing work? I mean, it influences it, it kind of, it's definitely a piece of it, but really how it changed me was the biggest benefit. So that totally makes sense.
Absolutely.
So tell me about these 8 limbs, because I think most people think limbs, you're just twisting those into pretzels in yoga, and that's all yoga is.
There's so much more.
It's much more.
So in yoga, we have 8 limbs that we kind of live by. They're kind of life lessons or things to live by. And the poses that we talk about on a regular basis still here in the West mostly, because all of this comes from the East. But in the West, the poses is just one portion of those 8 limbs, which is, I mean, if you really think about it, there's so much more to yoga than what's included in that portion of it that we've kind of taken to the West and used on a regular basis. So they're yamas and niyamas, which are the first 2 limbs. And yamas are basically virtues of morality. So there are things that teach us how to how to think about things and how to apply them into your life. And then there's niyamas, which are personal observations. So they're things that you do for yourself. That and I won't go into what each of those are, but those are definitely things that are included in both the yamas and the niyamas. And then there are the asanas, which are the poses, which we all kind of know about. Pranayama, which is the breath that of our yoga, which is such a huge part of what yoga is the breath and how we incorporate that into our daily practice. Pranayama, which is the breath that we take. Now, the pranayama is such a big part of yoga. It's such a big part of everything, because you figure the first thing that you do when you are born is breathe. And the last thing that you do when you leave is breathe. So it's really our power that we have every single day, every single breath. It's what kind of brings everything to us. So the breath is a huge one. And then there's meditation, which is part of what we want to incorporate into our daily life. So meditation is a big part of that as well, which is why so many people, you'll see those two paired. You'll see yoga and meditation, breath work, all of this kind of paired together for what makes a whole for all of those things. You go back and forth between those things, and so the 8 limbs that which one did I not say? Okay, so concentration is another one. So being able to concentrate. So like with the breath we have that we live by on a daily basis. The pairing that with meditation, or pairing that with the yoga movement, or pairing that with all of the things that we have going on within our practice, makes everything brighter, better. It brings everything back together. So those are a little bit about the 8 limbs of yoga. I think I covered them all. And how we incorporate all of those things into how we live the yoga life. Now, I mentioned the yamas and the niyamas, and just to kind of go over a little bit about what those are. The yamas are the 5 ethical practices. So you have kindness, truthfulness, non-stealing, moderation, and generosity. And then for the niyamas, you have purity, contentment, self-study, and surrender. So you have those are all, again, just different guidelines that you use to live your life. Really, they're just guidelines to live your life.
So to way, way, way oversimplify it, I'm sure, it sounds like it's very much about finding grace and finding peace and finding a way to live your life in the most harmonious way possible. And the poses are just meant to be a tool to do that. It just so happens to be that, like everything else the West has brought over from other countries, we have kind of bastardized it and dumbed it down to just bend yourself into a pretzel and everything in life will be okay.
Right.
No.
Right. And there's this thought process, and there are those yoga teachers who talk about, okay, bend yourself into a pretzel, and this is what yoga is. But the yoga that I teach is for beginners and for people who can't do that stuff. So it's more about what can you do, what poses can you do in whatever manner. It doesn't have to look the same as what I'm doing to have the benefit of what yoga is. And that is getting quiet and being able to listen to your heart, connect with yourself is the biggest one in yoga. Is how do you get quiet and connect with yourself? So this idea that you have to get into a pretzel in order to do yoga, that's just not true. You could literally bend over into a forward fold and you're doing yoga. I mean, it's that simple, right? You don't have to do all these crazy poses. And I think people are scared away from yoga because of that, because they think, well, I can't do that. So, I'm not flexible. Well, that's not what it's about. I mean, you, of course, your flexibility is going to improve, but you start where you are and we do yoga from that place. And then when you're able to stretch farther, then we just change the poses a little bit to accommodate where you are. So we just start where you are in today, with your body, and really focus on getting quiet, listening to yourself, listening to your inner voice, and focusing on those things and getting into what I call simple poses, right? You don't have to, like I said, a forward fold forward, and you're definitely in a yoga pose. It's that simple.
I love that, because it really is supposed to be that simple. And it is supposed to be about meeting yourself where you're at. And I have to say that as someone who is on the larger bosomed side, it was always very frustrating for me to have these skinny, mini, teeny little cheerleader types doing a yoga class, and they'd be like, and now, we'll be down like in, I don't know, some crouch down position, and they'll be like, now swing your leg forward. I'm like, I can't, my boobs are in the way. And they don't take that into consideration. Like, we have real bodies, and they are all different shapes and sizes, and they're all beautiful. I'm not really knocking the skinny mini cheerleader types. It's just a description. All those body types are beautiful and can do yoga if we were to be teaching it the way that it sounds like you teach it. There was no way I'm going to swing my leg from, well, I'm crunched down, bent forward, and like, I don't know, downward dog or something, and swing my leg forward so that I can, go from there into like warrior. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Boobs in the way, right? They're literally like a door in the way. So give me another way to do this, right? And not all teachers can adapt to that. And I think, like you said, that can turn some people off because they feel like, well, this just isn't meant for me. My body doesn't do it right.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people who come to you with that? Like, I'm sure you've had those people come to you and say, my body doesn't do yoga or something along those lines.
Yeah. And what I say is everybody can do yoga. And in my practice, in my teaching, what I will say is, okay, we're going to do this. Now, if that doesn't feel comfortable, if that doesn't work for your body, let's do this, or let's do this. And, give a lot of different recommendations of things that you can do with your body. And yoga is about the poses. That's one of the 8 limbs, but it's also about connecting with yourself. And you don't have to get into a pretzel to connect with yourself, right? You don't have to fling that leg forward in order to connect with yourself. So rather than doing that leg forward, you just step towards your hands, right? It's like, or whatever the pose actually is. You just take steps towards your hand, or you, while we're doing this pose, go ahead and lay, if it's something that your body doesn't allow, go ahead and lay on your back. And we'll be with you, and just, you can catch up with us in a second, which I don't like to do, but that's something that you could do as well, is go into what we call child's pose. And child's pose is a safe place that you can go to at any point during the yoga class. And the child's pose is really known as, any yoga teacher that sees you in child's pose will leave you there, because that's the safe place to go, and nobody will question why you're there or stop you or anything. It's just kind of, that's your moment. Now, you can, even if you're doing a class that's vigorous and you decide, I want to go into child's pose, and everybody else is standing up, that's okay. That's just the way that it works. It's your body, it's your time, and you want to spend it with your body, with something that you enjoy doing. And so I've done both. I've had the skinny body, and I've had a bigger body, which, both of those yoga is different for. And I've had to make adjustments into my body that, with the weight that I've gained, that I could totally do when I was super, thin. I could totally do that. And then now it's not that easy for me to do that. So it's like, you just make adjustments as you need to, based on what your body needs. And really, at the same time, try not to, like what you were thinking, which is, I can't do what everybody else is doing, so I am not doing it right. That, try to keep that out of everyone's mind, because there's no right or wrong, right? There's just, I just don't want you to get hurt. So if there's something that you're doing that you're not aligned right, or something that like that I can go over and say, how does this feel if you do it this way? And if it doesn't feel right doing it the correct way, then we're going to make adjustments. That's what it's all about.
I feel like this mirrors life, right? Like we all have to make adjustments because things in life change. Our bodies change. You have to adjust in yoga. Our bodies change. You have to adjust in life. Our living situation changes. Things
Right.
change and you have to adapt and adjust. And you might have somebody, a quote unquote teacher person, come along and say, hey, how does it feel if you adapt this way? Oh, you don't like that? All right, let's try this other way. Right? Like I feel like with the right teacher, which it sounds like you are definitely one of those, it mirrors life and it's really meant to be a loving, kind practice to yourself. I do feel like, unfortunately, there are those people who maybe it's because they trained with a different way than you were trained, or I don't know, but they just approach it like, who can get into the best pretzel? Right. So, and it's unfortunate because it scares people off from something that could actually really help them just cope with life better, because it does mirror life. Yeah. So how do you talk to those people? How do you get them to give yoga another try?
Well, for me, I do just what you said. I said, you should try again, because it's not, depending on it's just like a teacher that you have for college or a teacher that you have in elementary school, right? You're going to connect with a certain teacher a certain way. And so if you feel like you didn't connect with that person, if that person's choice in yoga is vinyasa, which is a high speed, up and down, you go up and down version of yoga that's constantly moving, if that's not what feels good for you and you want to do more a restorative yoga, then you're just not with the right teacher. It could be that simple, because each teacher kind of has a preference of what they prefer to teach. Now they may teach, all aspects of it, but there's a preference of what they like to teach. So I would find the right teacher. And sometimes that takes a couple different classes, or even just talking to somebody. Sometimes you can go into a yoga studio and talk to the teachers as you're, at the counter, and you can talk to the teachers and find out what the different styles of yoga is. Mine just happens to be, I do a little bit of yin yoga, which is where you hold poses for 3 minutes. So you're getting deep tissue, stretching. And then I do restorative yoga. I do beginner's yoga. So they're all real light, yoga, movements. And I also look at the crowd that's in the class, because typically you have the same people attending and thinking, okay, well, this person can do, everybody in here I think can do a squat, or this is a class where I wouldn't do a squat in, right? So it's just a matter of really getting to know those people that are in there and focusing on what they're, what they are capable of doing, rather than just throwing anything and everything out there for them to do. Does that answer your question?
So
yeah.
It definitely does, but it actually brings up another question, because I'm thinking of it as the teacher's perspective now, because that was what my training was in, was teaching, right? So do you, like you said, you kind of adapt it based on who's in the room, which is awesome. You need to do that, obviously. But does that mean like you just fly by the seat of your pants and you make up the class as you go along? Or do you like have a plan of what you're going to do and then you just adapt that plan as needed?
So when I first started teaching yoga, I had literally a list of every pose that I was going to do in the class. And I had my iPad and I had it all set up, and I went by that list, just kind of, to make sure that everybody, or to get through everything and make sure the class was long enough. And now I use my intuition, and because I've been doing it for so long, I know the poses that I can think, okay, let's do this one next, or this feels good. So I don't go into class with a actual laid out plan. There may be something in the back of my mind that says, oh, I haven't done this in a while, I want to try this tonight. Or I've seen somebody try a movement differently, so I want to incorporate that. Or so those things are definitely there. Now, they're like, for example, yin yoga, which is where you hold poses for up to 3 minutes, is not for everybody, because you really need to be laying or sitting in a position for 3 minutes without without, well, you don't want to try to move as much, because then you can relax into the pose as it goes on so that you're getting a deeper and deeper stretch. Now, that's not for everyone. And I know there's students in my classes that don't necessarily like that. So I try to avoid those types of things when those people are in class. And it doesn't mean that I let the students really run the show, because that's not what it is. It's just a matter of, okay, we have these particular people in class that I'm familiar with. And so let's try things that work with them. So, yeah, I think I use my intuition to kind of just say, okay, well, let's try this next. And then if you can hear people too, if you try something and they're like, ugh, and making noises, then that, okay, maybe lighter is going to be better for the next pose, to recuperate a little bit or whatnot.
That makes total sense. And I love how you were saying, like, it's not that the students are running the show, but they are informing how you run the show, basically, because it kind of echoes how I run my sisterhood group. Like, everybody has a say. It's not that you're dictating to me, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but it's their group, just like it's their class for your yoga classes. So they get to input and they get to say, like, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that, and I would like to do this. And you facilitate to make sure that they get what they need. And I think that's a beautiful way to teach it and to practice yoga also. Like, I feel like it's kind of both in that way. So do you teach only in person? Do you teach online? How can people connect with you?
So right now I teach in person. I don't have a place, unfortunately, to actually do yoga and record myself in my house currently. We have a lot of people living with us. So all my rooms are taken, so I don't do anything online currently. I did for a little while during COVID. The idea of having, an opportunity for people to do yoga with me or to practice with me would be amazing. So you can always reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram under Angel Evanger, and those things I do post there, and I do have information there that I'd love to share with everybody.
Perfect. And I will definitely put those links in the show notes for everyone to make sure that they can find you. What else? What else do you feel like people need to know?
One thing that I didn't mention is meditation. Now, there's kind of this disbelief or this belief that yoga or that meditation means clearing the mind, which that obviously is ultimately the goal, is to clear the mind, but you never will actually clear your mind the entire time that you're alive. It's just not going to happen, right? So I think that we're setting people up for failure when we say that, because really what it is about teaching the mind to focus on one thing. And that's why in yoga we always say focus on the breath, because you're focusing your attention onto one thing, and then your mind can't do a million things at the same time if you're focusing on one thing. And so in yoga that's the breath. But it can also be like I talk about, okay, how does the air feel as it goes in your nose? How does it feel as it travels down the back of your throat into your chest? How do you feel your chest rising and opening? So all of those things can be part of focusing on the breath. What a temperature is the air as it leaves your lungs? So those things, focusing on those things, or if you have something specific that you want to meditate about, like if you're asking for a question or, looking for guidance in some way, you can also focus on that thing and make that the focus of your meditation. So this idea that we need to clear the mind and have no thoughts at all it's not realistic. We're never going to get to that point. So, well, maybe we will if you're a monk and you meditate for hours at a time. But for us that are just the standard, people that are trying to do yoga and meditation, really it's just a practice that we start. And with meditation, just focus on something for one thing and start for a minute or two. Just set a timer on your phone for a minute or two, and then increase it as you kind of go. And meditation is such a great practice, and it's one of the 8 limbs. So if you want to start to incorporate more things about yoga into your life, meditation is a great way to do that.
I love what you said about you're never going to have an empty mind, because we're not designed that way. I call it the lizard brain, right? Our brains are designed to keep us alive, which means they are constantly thinking and constantly on alert. There's a reason that so much of the population is prescribed anxiety meds. We are designed to be anxious. Like that's the way our brains work. That there's nothing actually wrong with being anxious. It's only a problem when it overtakes your life and you're like, I can't even leave my house or whatever. But meditation, the reason it helps with that is because it's the exact opposite of this multitasking world that we've been forced to live in, right? Anybody who's ever worked an office job or a retail job or a hospitality industry job, there's a million things coming at you and a million people coming at you wanting a million different things. And you're somehow supposed to meet all of those needs seamlessly and easily. And like, it was not a big deal. Well, no wonder your brain is freaking out. Meditation is the exact opposite of that. It's focus on one thing, just one thing. And it helps disconnect that lizard brain from being quite so anxious. That's why they tell you to meditate when you're anxious. It has nothing to do with turn off your mind and be empty.
Exactly.
It's just, it helps your lizard brain to go, okay, there's not a million things happening right now. There's one thing happening and just this one thing. It's about being present with the one thing, whatever it is. And I tell people, if you can't, and you can tell me if this makes sense from the yoga standpoint, but I always tell people, if you can't just sit still and focus on one thing in your brain for like a minute, then don't. Go for a run. And instead of thinking all the things you think while you're running, focus on your breath or your steps while you're running. But the point is if you can't sit still, you can't sit still. ADHD is a thing. We can't all sit still. It's about your focus, not what you're doing in space. At least that's what
absolutely. I think. There are some traditions in yoga that think that you have to be sitting in order to do that. But I think that walking meditations or meditations, like you said, where you're running, it does not have to be this environment to where, you have the candles lit and you have the music going, or, you don't have to have all that. You want to find a place where you can focus your mind on one thing, and running, I think, is a great way of doing that, or walking, because you are, quote unquote, busy because your mind or your body's moving, but you can still focus on that breath. You can still focus on that one thing that you want to focus on to bring kind of that calmness in.
Yeah. And another one that I tell people a lot, not that I do this one because I hate doing dishes, but doing dishes is definitely one of those things. For people that find that to be something that either they have to do or they like doing. I'm just one of those people. I will find a way to have a dishwasher, but many people are not like that. But you can focus on the feel of the soap or the temperature of the water and just make that be your only focus. Again, it's about the focus, right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? Anything?
No, I think that's great. I think I appreciate you, giving me the time to kind of talk a little bit about yoga. I hope that it was clear enough for people to kind of follow. And I tried not to include too much because it can get a little philosophy-ish. So I just wanted to keep it simple, but yeah, I think yoga can be for everybody, and breath work can be for everybody. And, all those aspects that we go into with the 8 limbs of yoga, everybody can participate that. It's just a matter of figuring out what is your participation? How do you fit into that?
Yeah, I really appreciate you being on the show and untangling this yoga pretzel for everybody, because I know that it's definitely something that I had to learn. And I think it's definitely a misconception that a lot of people walk around with, is yoga means you're a pretzel. So I appreciate you unpretzeling it for us. For my listeners, again, all of the links to find Angel will be in the show notes. If you want to make sure you remember to come back and check them out, remember the word yoga in your brains. And then next time you're in front of something where you can click links, come on back to Give a Fuck, presented by Spark Consciousness, and find this episode and click those links for her. In the meantime, continue to expand your knowledge, feel the connections, and live with compassion.